Victoria Marlowe sat in the hospital corridor, her fingers stained with charcoal from the sketch she had abandoned hours ago. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her exhausted face. She was 24, with dark, auburn hair pulled into a messy knot, wearing jeans with paint splatters and a cardigan that had seen better days. Her art studio barely covered rent, let alone the mounting medical bills that now towered like an impossible mountain before her family. Through the window of room 304, she could see her father sleeping, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped with mechanical precision. Thomas Marlowe had been a high school teacher for 30 years, a man who believed in books and kindness more than money. Now his heart was failing, and the surgery he needed cost more than Victoria could earn in 5 years of selling paintings at weekend markets. An unexpected visitor. The click of expensive heels against linoleum pulled Victoria from her thoughts. A woman approached, elegant and imposing, dressed in a tailored cream suit that probably cost more than Victoria's entire wardrobe. Her silver hair was styled perfectly, her posture radiating authority. She stopped directly in front of Victoria, extending a business card with manicured fingers. Catherine Sterling. The name alone commanded respect in the city. She was the matriarch of the Sterling Empire, a woman who had turned her late husband's modest investments into a billion-dollar conglomerate. Her son, Nathaniel Sterling, was rarely photographed, almost never interviewed, and rumored to be as cold as the marble floors of their family estate. Victoria took the card with trembling fingers. Catherine's smile was polite but calculated, like a chess player who already knew how the game would end. "Miss Marlowe, I understand your father needs surgery that you cannot afford," Catherine said, her voice smooth as silk and just as expensive. "I have a proposition that could solve your problem entirely." The proposal. They met the next morning in a cafe that overlooked the financial district. Catherine ordered tea that Victoria had never heard of, while Victoria clutched a simple coffee, her hands wrapped around the cup for warmth she did not really need. The older woman wasted no time with pleasantries. "My son is 36 years old and has shown no interest in settling down. He buries himself in work, avoids social obligations, and has built walls so high that no woman has managed to climb them," Catherine explained, stirring her tea with precision. "I need someone who can break through that isolation. Someone real, genuine, without the polish and pretense of our usual circles." Victoria felt her stomach tighten. She understood where this conversation was heading, and every instinct told her to walk away. But then she thought of her father's labored breathing, her mother's tears as she reviewed bills they could never pay, and the hopelessness that had become their constant companion. "You want me to meet your son?" Victoria said quietly. "I want you to attend our annual gala next Friday. I want you to be yourself. Speak with him if the opportunity arises, and allow nature to take its course," Catherine corrected smoothly. "If you make an impression, if he shows genuine interest, then your father's medical expenses will be handled completely. The surgery, the recovery, everything." Victoria's throat felt tight. "And if I refuse?" Catherine's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Then you refuse. I am not in the business of forcing people into arrangements, but opportunities like this rarely present themselves twice, Miss Marlowe. Your father has perhaps 2 months without intervention. The surgery has a waiting list of 8 months through public health care. Time is not on your side." The decision Victoria left the cafe feeling as though she had swallowed stones. She walked through the city park, watching couples stroll hand in hand, children chase pigeons, businessmen hurry past with briefcases and purpose. Everyone seemed to belong to a world that made sense, while she stood at a crossroads that felt more like a cliff edge. That evening, she sat beside her father's hospital bed. He was awake, his eyes tired but warm. He took her hand with his own, which felt frailer than she remembered. "You look troubled, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice scratchy from the oxygen tube. Victoria forced a smile. Just worried about you, Dad. He squeezed her hand weakly. I have lived a good life, Victoria. If my time comes, I have no regrets. But you have so much ahead of you. Do not let my situation force you into choices that hurt your soul. Promise me. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. How could she promise something like that when his life hung in the balance? How could she tell him that saving him might cost her something she could not yet name? The preparation. The next few days passed in a blur. Catherine's assistant delivered a gown to Victoria's small apartment, a midnight blue dress that fit perfectly, along with shoes and accessories that sparkled with understated elegance. No instructions came with the package, only a note card, with the gala address and time. Victoria stood before her bathroom mirror on Friday evening, barely recognizing herself. The dress transformed her, made her look like she belonged in a world of champagne and crystal chandeliers. But beneath the silk and shimmer, her heart raced with fear and guilt. She thought of Nathaniel Sterling, this man she had never met, who had no idea his mother was orchestrating encounters like pieces on a board. She thought of her father, fighting for every breath. And she thought of herself, caught between love and survival, dignity and desperation. As the car Catherine had sent pulled up outside her building, Victoria took one last look at her reflection. She whispered to the stranger in the mirror, "Forgive me for what I am about to do." Then she stepped into the night, toward a destiny she had not chosen but could no longer avoid. The car glided through iron gates that seemed to touch the sky, winding up a drive lined with ancient oak trees whose branches formed a canopy overhead. Victoria pressed her face close to the window, watching as the Sterling Manor emerged from the darkness like a palace from another century. Warm light spilled from enormous windows, and she could see silhouettes of guests moving inside, their laughter and music drifting out into the cool evening air. Her hands were ice-cold despite the heated car. She had rehearsed conversations in her mind 100 times, practiced smiles in the mirror until her face hurt, but none of it had prepared her for the sheer magnitude of this world. As the driver opened her door, offering his gloved hand, Victoria stepped onto marble steps that gleamed like polished moonlight. Inside, the entrance hall took her breath away. A chandelier the size of her entire apartment hung overhead, dripping with crystals that caught and scattered light like captured stars. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits moved with effortless grace, holding champagne flutes and speaking in tones that suggested every word mattered. Victoria felt like an imposter wearing a costume, certain that everyone could see through her borrowed elegance to the struggling artist beneath. A moment of refuge, the crowd overwhelmed her quickly. She found herself retreating toward the back of the mansion, slipping through French doors onto a stone terrace that overlooked manicured gardens. The November air bit at her bare shoulders, but she welcomed the cold. It felt real, honest, unlike the performance happening inside. She leaned against the balustrade, closing her eyes and breathing deeply, the scent of late-blooming roses mixed with wood smoke from somewhere beyond the gardens. For a moment, she could almost forget why she was here, almost pretend she was just a girl enjoying a beautiful evening. Running away already? Victoria spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the golden glow from inside. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled his impeccably tailored tuxedo. As he stepped onto the terrace, the light caught his features. Strong jawline, dark hair slightly tousled as if he had run his fingers through it repeatedly, and eyes that were a striking shade of green, intelligent and guarded. Nathaniel Sterling. She recognized him from the few photos that existed online, though none of them had captured the intensity of his presence in person. "I needed air," Victoria managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "The crowd inside is a bit much." He moved, to the opposite end of the terrace, maintaining a respectful distance, and pulled a silver case from his jacket pocket. "Do you mind?" he asked, gesturing with an unlit cigarette. Victoria shook her head. She watched as he lit it, the small flame briefly illuminating his face. There was something weary in his expression, something that spoke of a man going through motions rather than living moments. An honest conversation. "You do not seem like you belong here," Nathaniel said after a long silence, exhaling smoke into the night air. There was no judgment in his tone, only observation. Victoria laughed softly, surprised by his directness. "Is it that obvious?" "Only because everyone else in that room is performing. You look like you wish you were anywhere else." He turned to face her properly. "I am Nathaniel, by the way, though I suspect you already knew that." "Victoria Marlowe," she replied, deciding in that instant to be as honest as possible without revealing everything. "And you are right. I would rather be in my studio, covered in paint, listening to old jazz records and forgetting the world exists." His eyebrows rose slightly, genuine interest flickering across his features. "You are an artist?" "Trying to be," Victoria said, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. "Mostly I paint things nobody wants to buy and work part-time at a coffee shop to make rent. Not exactly the glamorous life." Nathaniel smiled then, a real smile that softened the hard lines of his face. "That sounds considerably more honest than anything happening in there." He gestured toward the mansion. "Most of these people have never created anything in their lives. They buy and sell and accumulate, but they do not build with their own hands." Victoria felt something unexpected, a connection, fragile as spider silk, but undeniably real. This was not the cold, distant billionaire she had imagined. This was a man who seemed as trapped by this world as she felt in this moment. The garden walk Nathaniel stubbed out his cigarette and surprised her by asking, "Would you walk with me? The gardens are actually quite beautiful at night, and I find I can only tolerate my mother's parties in small doses." They descended stone steps into the gardens, following paths lit by subtle ground lights. The party sounds faded behind them, replaced by the whisper of wind through leaves and the distant call of a night bird. Victoria's borrowed heels clicked softly on the pathway, and she was acutely aware of Nathaniel walking beside her, his hands clasped behind his back. "My father planted these gardens," Nathaniel said, pausing beside a fountain where water trickled over stone carved into the shape of angels. "He believed that beauty should serve no purpose except to exist. My mother wanted to pave it all over, create a tennis court and swimming pool, something useful. But you kept it," Victoria observed. "I kept it," he confirmed. "One of the few battles I have won against her vision of what my life should be." Victoria heard the weight in those words, the years of conflict compressed into a single sentence. She found herself asking, "What do you want your life to be?" Nathaniel turned to look at her, and in the moonlight his expression was unguarded, almost vulnerable. "I have spent so long doing what was expected that I am not sure I remember what wanting feels like. I run companies I did not build, attend parties I do not enjoy, and make decisions that affect thousands of people I will never meet. Somewhere in all of that, I lost track of who I actually am." The moment of truth, Victoria's chest tightened with guilt. Here was this man, opening himself to her with unexpected honesty, and she was here because his mother had orchestrated it. Every word between them felt like a lie, even though she had told him nothing but truth about herself. "Why are you really here tonight, Victoria?" Nathaniel asked suddenly, his intuition sharp. "My mother does not invite struggling artists to her galas unless there is a reason. What did she promise you?" Victoria's breath caught. She had been caught off guard by his perception, by the way he seemed to see through pretense to the heart of things. She opened her mouth, searching for words that would not be a complete betrayal of the truth. Before she could answer, a voice cut through the garden like a blade. Nathaniel, there you are. I have been looking everywhere. Catherine. Sterling appeared on the path, her cream suit exchanged for an evening gown of deep emerald. Her eyes moved from her son to Victoria, calculating and cold despite her warm smile. I see you have met Miss Marlowe, Catherine said smoothly. How delightful. Victoria, dear, are you enjoying the party? Victoria felt trapped between them, mother and son aware that she was a piece in a game she did not fully understand. Nathaniel's expression had changed the moment his mother appeared. Walls slamming back into place, his face becoming a mask of polite indifference. But his eyes, when they met Victoria's for just a moment, held a question and something else. A flicker of disappointment, as if he had suspected this exact scenario and had hoped, just for a moment, that he might be wrong. The realization Catherine linked her arm through Victoria's with a grip that was gentle but unyielding. Come, dear. There are several people I would like you to meet. Nathaniel, your presence is required inside. The Harrington family wishes to discuss the merger. As Catherine steered her back toward the mansion, Victoria glanced over her shoulder. Nathaniel stood alone beside the fountain, watching them leave. The moonlight cast his face in shadow, but she could feel the weight of his gaze, could sense the wheels turning in his mind. He knew. Perhaps not the details, but he understood that his mother had brought Victoria here with purpose. And in that understanding, whatever fragile connection had begun to form between them cracked like ice under too much weight. Victoria's heart sank as she realized the truth. Catherine had not wanted her to simply meet Nathaniel. She had wanted to demonstrate control, to show her son that even his private moments, even his honest conversations, were subject to her manipulation. And Victoria had been the instrument of that demonstration, willing or not. The party continued for another hour, but Victoria felt like a ghost moving through it. Catherine paraded her past various guests, introducing her with careful words that suggested connection without promising anything concrete. Victoria smiled until her face ached, nodded at conversations she barely heard, and felt the weight of Nathaniel's absence like a stone in her chest. When Catherine finally released her, claiming business to attend to, Victoria found herself wandering the mansion's corridors. The sounds of the party faded as she moved deeper into the private wings, past oil paintings of Sterling ancestors who stared down with stern expressions, past rooms filled with antique furniture and the scent of old money. She should leave, call for the car and escape back to her small apartment, back to her real life. But her feet carried her forward, drawn by something she could not name, until she found herself standing before a heavy oak door left slightly ajar. Warm light spilled through the gap, and she heard the soft clink of glass against wood. Victoria pushed the door open quietly. The room was a study, lined floor to ceiling with books, a fire crackling in a stone fireplace. Nathaniel stood with his back to her, pouring amber liquid from a crystal decanter into a glass. He had removed his jacket and loosened his tie, and there was something defeated in the slope of his shoulders. "You should not be here," he said without turning around, his voice rough. "This wing is private." "I know," Victoria replied softly. "I am sorry. I just needed to find you before I left." The confession Nathaniel turned then, and the look on his face made Victoria's breath catch. It was not anger exactly, but something deeper and more painful. Resignation mixed with betrayal, the expression of a man who had hoped for something different and been proven foolish for hoping. "Let me guess," he said, taking a long drink from his glass. "My mother found you somehow, discovered you needed money, perhaps for medical bills or debt. She offered you a solution if you would simply attend her party, be yourself, and see what happened." His laugh was bitter. "Am I close?" Victoria felt tears burn behind her eyes. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Nathaniel set his glass down with more force than necessary. Of course she did. Because heaven forbid I meet someone organically, someone who might actually want to know me rather than what I can provide. He ran his hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. Do you know how many times she has done this? How many women she has brought into my life, each one carefully selected, each one desperate enough to play along? I am sorry, Victoria whispered, tears now streaming down her cheeks. My father is dying. He needs surgery we cannot afford, and she said if I came tonight, if I made an impression, she would pay for everything. I told myself it was just attending a party, just being myself, that it was not really lying. But it was, Nathaniel said, his voice softer now but no less pained. Because you knew why you were here, and I did not. Everything we said in that garden, every honest word, was built on a foundation of manipulation. The truth. Laid bare Victoria sank into a leather chair, her borrowed dress suddenly feeling like chains. You are right. You are absolutely right. And I have no excuse except that I was desperate and frightened and willing to compromise pieces of myself I should have protected. She looked up at him, meeting his eyes directly. But those things I told you about myself were true. My love for art, my tiny studio, the life I am trying to build, that was real, even if the reason I was standing on that terrace was constructed. Nathaniel studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he moved to the chair opposite hers, sitting with his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. Tell me about your father. The request surprised her. Victoria wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. His name is Thomas. He taught English literature for 30 years at a public high school. He never made much money, but he loved his students, loved books, loved making people think. Her voice cracked. 6 months ago, his heart started failing. The doctors say he needs a transplant, but he is not high enough on the list, and the medication to keep him stable costs more than we can manage. And my mother knew this, Nathaniel said quietly. She knew everything. She had researched me, probably investigated my entire life. She knew exactly where to apply pressure. Victoria looked at her hands, at the paint stain under one fingernail, that even the fancy dress could not hide. I wanted to hate you. It would have been easier if you were the cold, arrogant man I imagined. But you were kind, and honest, and lonely in a way I understood. Catherine's arrival. The door opened without warning. Catherine Sterling entered as if she had every right to be there, her expression composed, but her eyes sharp with assessment. She took in the scene before her. Her son and Victoria in his private study, tears on Victoria's face, tension thick in the air. I hope I am not interrupting, Catherine said, though her tone suggested she did not care either way. She closed the door behind her with a soft click that sounded final. Nathaniel stood immediately, his body language shifting to something harder, more defensive. You have done quite enough for one evening, Mother. Have I? Catherine moved further, into the room, her gaze moving between them like a physician examining symptoms. I provided Miss Marlowe with an opportunity to save her father's life. I gave you a chance to meet someone real, someone outside our usual circles. I see no harm in any of this. You see no harm in manipulation? Nathaniel's voice rose, anger breaking through his usual control. In treating people like chess pieces? In ensuring that even my private conversations are part of your grand design? Catherine's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. I am protecting you, Nathaniel. Protecting our family, our legacy. You have hidden yourself away for years, refusing every introduction, rejecting every suitable woman. Did you expect me to simply allow the Sterling line to end? Because you prefer solitude to responsibility? The breaking point Victoria stood then, her legs shaky but her voice steady. Mrs. Sterling, you offered me a deal, and I accepted it because I was desperate. But I will not be part of this anymore. She turned to Nathaniel, her heart breaking. Even as she spoke, I am sorry for my part in this. Truly, you deserve better than to have your life orchestrated like a business transaction. She moved toward the door, but Nathaniel's voice stopped her. Wait. He turned to his mother, and Victoria saw something change in him. The walls he had built, the careful control he maintained, all of it seemed to crack and fall away. What remained was raw and powerful. A man who had reached the end of his patience. I am done, Nathaniel said quietly, but the words carried the weight of stone. I am done with your schemes, your arrangements, your belief that you can control every aspect of my existence. Victoria came here because she was desperate, because you found her weakness and exploited it. But I choose to see past that. I choose to see the person who was honest with me in the garden, who told me truth even when surrounded by lies. Catherine's composure finally cracked, her voice sharp. You cannot be serious. This girl is nobody, Nathaniel. She has no connections, no breeding, no understanding of our world. She is a temporary fascination born of rebellion, nothing more. Perhaps, Nathaniel agreed, moving to stand beside Victoria. Or perhaps she is the first real thing that has entered my life in years. Either way, it is my choice to make, not yours. The choice Victoria felt Nathaniel's hand find hers, warm and steady. She looked up at him, seeing the determination in his eyes, the quiet strength that had been hiding beneath his isolated exterior. But she also saw the cost of what he was offering, the bridges he was burning with his mother, the consequences he would face for defying her. Nathaniel, Victoria said softly, you do not have to do this. I knew what I was walking into, and I made my choice. You should not sacrifice your relationship with your mother because of me. He squeezed her hand gently. I am not doing this because of you, Victoria. I am doing this because of me. Because if I let her win this time, if I allow her to dictate even this, then I have no life of my own at all. Catherine watched them, her expression cycling through anger, disbelief, and finally something that might have been hurt, though it passed too quickly to be certain. If you walk away from me now, Nathaniel, if you choose this path, do not expect me to simply forgive and forget. There will be consequences. I know, Nathaniel replied, his voice steady. But for the first time in a very long time, those consequences will be the result of my choices, not yours. A new beginning. Catherine left without another word, her exit as controlled as her entrance, but Victoria could feel the storm that would follow. The door closed, and the silence that remained was heavy with possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. Nathaniel released Victoria's hand and moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. I meant what I said in there, not because I am in love with you, or because I believe we are destined for some fairy tale ending, but because you reminded me that there is a world beyond these walls, beyond obligations and expectations. Victoria joined him at the fire, feeling the warmth seep into her cold bones. What happens now? Now? Nathaniel turned to face her, and, for the first time since they met, she saw something like hope in his expression. Now I pay for your father's surgery, because that was the deal my mother made, and I will honor it even if she will not. And then, if you are willing, we start over. No manipulation, no arrangements. Just two people who met at a party and found something worth exploring. Victoria felt fresh tears, but these were different. Not tears of shame or guilt, but of relief and gratitude. I would like that, she said softly. Though I should warn you, my life is considerably less glamorous than all this. Nathaniel smiled, genuine and warm. Good. I have had quite enough glamour to last a lifetime. Outside the study windows, the party continued, oblivious to the small revolution that had occurred in the private wing. Guests danced and laughed. Deals were made, alliances were forged, and the world of wealth and power continued turning as it always had. But in that quiet room, beside a crackling fire, two people stood together and chose something different. Not perfection, not certainty, but the possibility of something real built on honesty rather than obligation, on choice rather than necessity. Victoria thought of her father, of the hope that now existed where before there had been only despair. She thought of the price that had been paid, the complications that would surely follow, and the uncertain road ahead. And for the first time in months, she felt something she had almost forgotten: the lightness of being seen, truly seen, by another person. Nathaniel offered her his jacket as the night grew colder, and together they stepped out onto the terrace where they had first met. The party sounds drifted through the air, the gardens stretched out before them in moonlit beauty, and, somewhere beyond the gates, a life neither of them could yet imagine was waiting to be discovered. The end.